Hello everyone, I'm Tori.
And I'm Coriana.
And welcome to God in All Things. Today we are doing a special episode because if you've been with us for a couple months, we did a little book swap over Christmas. And today we're going to be discussing those books and some gospel principles we've learned from them. We're not going to go in as deep as we do with the other ones because that would take way too long with the two books. Plus we don't want to, because they're like more recently published things, and we won't have titled the episode, we didn't want to spoil anybody on them because they're a little lesser known. So we'll just talk about them. There may be mild spoilers just as we discuss the gospel principles and need to discuss a few things. It's kind of hard to
actually discuss a book.
So be aware of that. There may be some spoilers in this. It's not going to be as extensive though as we usually go, like I said. So I think we'll just get into it, we'll start with the one I gave to Cariana, which was the 13th Tale. So we'll go with a very basic summary on that, or synopsis, and then I'll review my thoughts on it, why I gave it to Cariana in case you missed it or forgot, and then we'll go into how Cariana enjoyed it. So let's start with the summary if you want to take that away.
Yeah, so this book is freaking complex. So here's my extremely simplified summary. So we have a mysterious author, okay, super famous, but nobody really knows anything about her, and she decides to spend her last days as an old lady kind of revealing her true life story to this very, very reclusive amateur biographer because of a particular interest that they both share in twins.
Very
shockingly
good synopsis.
Important aspect to the story.
Yes.
Twins.
The twins and sibling connection.
Yes.
Yep. It's
for
very
sure.
interesting. I gave this one to Cariana because I thought she would like it. I hoped so. It kind of has a very Victorian Gothic-esque vibe to it. I remember reading it and being like, wow, this has very much like Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is slightly after Victorian period, but still close. And so I really liked that aspect of it, and I actually consider it one of my favorite books of all time, especially like a more modern day written one. But I honestly don't really remember that much about it. I remember some of the big plot twists, and I remember liking the writing a lot. I do need to revisit it because, like I said, I've considered it for a while to be one of my favorite books ever. It's been probably 5 or 6 years since I read it, so maybe a little less than that actually, but still a long time. So how did you end up feeling about it?
I really, really enjoyed the book. Here it is for anybody watching the video. It definitely, I agree, it has more of a Victorian feel than a lot of other even set in Victorian times modern books, which was really, really fun. Obviously it's not perfect, it didn't give the exact not the Victorian feeling
language because still written
it's not
today,
what she was it's not what she was trying for either, which is fine. But yeah, it is really beautiful language. I thought the story was really impressive and super fun to unfold. I was like, I need to know what's going on. I need to know. Because the whole point is that you know something is going on. Yes. You just can't figure out what. So that definitely gripped me. It felt a little bit redundant at times, I'll admit. There are certain things that are repeated over and over and over again, which is honestly one of my least favorite things in writing. There are a few popular authors I could name that would be some hot takes where that I would say no, he repeats himself too often. Not that ruins the story, and then the main character is a little dramatic for me at times.
Yes,
which I don't know, feels hypocritical of me to say almost. Because literally Wuthering Heights is my favorite novel. And there's nothing more dramatic than that book. So I don't know what the difference is. Maybe just I don't know, maybe in other stories either I feel like there's a genuine reason for the drama, or there's no reason for the drama and they're literally just dramatic. Whereas in this book I feel like she gives a reason for the drama and I'm like, get over it. It's not that bad. Which actually leads right into my gospel principle. So if you're good with just kind of
let's just go for it.
Yeah, so the gospel principle that I kind of targeted for this was the idea that families are eternal. Just because a lot of the drama in this book hinges on the entire and complete lack of faith and belief in the fact that families are eternal. So much of the story is like, oh my gosh, guys, literally you're gonna see her again. Like, calm down, you know? And I think that's something that I finally realized. And I really don't want to take away from the book. I think I gave it like 4 or 5 stars on Goodreads. I really did enjoy it. I probably gave it 4 or 5 is really rare for me. So if it has 5 on my Goodreads, then in the moment
like,
I really loved it. Yeah, it just, so you have, it's multi-generational, dealing with 2 different sets of families. So you have 2 families, and kind of, well, one of them is more of just her anyway. It's so much. But basically, you have the main character. Is it too much of a spoiler to talk about, like, her twin? I don't think so. No, she has a twin who died at birth, right? And she is, like, really, really connected to that fact, right? And she can't get over it, and she, like, actively misses this twin who she never knew. And it has destroyed her relationship with her mom, because this mom also never got over the death of this daughter at birth. And so the mom, like, never really connected to her daughter who lived, because she just couldn't get over this death. And so they grew up just split apart. And then when our main character learns about this twin, she feels lied to and betrayed, and then she can't get over it. So then we have just this complete mother-daughter, like, disconnect, right? And so that was, like, it was a huge thing where I was like, you know, I'm just so grateful for the knowledge that you're just gonna see him again. Like, it really is okay. Like, it's a sad thing, more sad for the mom, obviously. I think I'm not gonna lie, like, the main character, I was like, literally, like, you're so fine. Please,
like, that's so
move on.
sad, but, like, does it really impact you that much, like, your experience in life that much?
Other than her relationship with her mom, which is where it's, which is honestly to me the saddest part, because it's like, you have something that could be a grief that's difficult, that, like, you could move on from through the knowledge of the plan of salvation, and be able to still just have that kind of happy familial relationship here on earth. Whereas instead we have this mother and this daughter who are both actively pushing each other away because of this grief that doesn't actually need to exist, and the extremity that it does, which is just really, really sad to me. And it's really similar in the author that I mentioned, right? She's revealing her life story. She gives us a multi-generational life story full of just people who are just tearing themselves apart, you know, through unnecessary grief and a misunderstanding of the fact that, like, all of this is forever, that you're going to see, not only that you're going to see this person again, but that you're eternally tied to these other people as well, who you're kind of, like, ignoring and not giving the familial support that you should. So not only, like, is it affecting lives here on earth and making them sadder, but it's affecting lives in the eternities as well, and making them more difficult. And you know, obviously I have faith that God works everything out, but but I also don't believe that everything's just easy once we die either. You know, it's just a continuation of our struggles here, so they're gonna still have to figure that out, and that's really sad for them. So yeah, that was my really, really big takeaway.
Yeah, I like that you bring up the idea of an afterlife, meaning that our relationships here need to be built up properly. I think sometimes we get in this mode of, like, happy to see the ones we love in the next life, while ignoring the fact that there's other people we could be seeing in the next life, that maybe there's more we could do to build up that relationship with them. And I'm so grateful that we do have a space, even just after this life, where some of those things can be remedied a little bit more in a way that maybe they couldn't be here. There's just extra chances and different ways that God allows us to have those opportunities. But I've heard a lot, you know, sometimes people are born into difficult situations and their family members are not helpful, and there's not really anything you can do about that. But I think there are situations where we could make it better and choose not to, out of spite or out of grief that we're holding on to with other situations, other relationships that we've lost or whatever. And it causes us to miss out on joys that God has already prepared specifically for us. Like, God really puts people in our lives for a reason, because I think everything has the potential to be really good if we choose to let it. And again, relationships are two-sided. Like, you can't force someone else to do something. And so, you know, sometimes you just have to figure out what's healthiest for you and the relationships that are going two ways, and you're able to build up that way. But losing sight of what life after this one really means is probably one of the most dangerous things we do. And I think a lot of the drama in that, I think a lot of the drama, going back to Wuthering Heights and the connection there, is to do with people not understanding the purpose of this life and not understanding what the next life is about and what it's meant to do. And you get so focused on things that are happening right now or aren't happening right now, and that's what you're concerned about, when there's just so much more that we just can't see. And it's such a blessing that we have a God who can see it and can help us through it if we let him.
Yeah, I definitely want to be sensitive to, like, difficult family relationships, right? Like, obviously, you know, I have my own difficult family relationships where I try to reach out and I try to stay Christ-like and meek and and continue to be there. And it's not really reciprocated, you know, and all I can do is my part, and I know other people have even more difficult relationships, and you know, I have a lot of really good family relationships at the same time, and not everybody can say that. So we understand that, like, God understands our circumstances, and God knows our hearts, right? Of course. But you know, it doesn't change the fact that the family is an essential part of the plan of salvation, and that the way things are going to quote unquote work out one day is through eternal families, whatever that means for each of us. So I read this talk simply titled The Eternal Family by Robert D. Hales from General Conference of October of 96. It was actually kind of interesting because this is just a year after the Family of Proclamation was released. And so he kind of mentions that, and it's like a new thing for them, which is a perspective that we don't
we've just always had it.
Yes, for like our age and younger, like we've just kind of, and a little bit older, of course, we've just kind of like grown up with it forever. So it was kind of interesting to see it as like this, like, okay, let's talk about what this means for us. So I'll just read this little section. He said, being one in a family carries a great responsibility of caring, loving, lifting, and strengthening each member of the family so that all can righteously endure to the end immortality and dwell together throughout eternity. Pause right there. I like that he says great responsibility, you know, because, like, of course, the balance of taking care of ourselves is important, but like, it's a burden, you know. It's Heavenly Father isn't saying like, oh yeah, this is just going to be great and easy for you, and this is just going to be so happy. Like, that's not the promise.
It never was.
It never was. He's never said that anywhere. No, it's a great thing that is difficult and worth it in the end, just like everything else that Heavenly Father gives us. So it's not enough just to save ourselves. It is equally important that parents, brothers, and sisters are saved in our families. If we return home alone to our Heavenly Father, we will be asked, where is the rest of the family? This is why we teach that families are forever. The eternal nature of an individual becomes the eternal nature of the family. I just thought that was such an interesting, where is the rest of the family? You know, like it's so important, and that's what Heavenly Father is looking for. So we just got to do what we can to stay united here, and understand that we'll be united in the eternities as well, and not spend our lives grieving.
Yes. Don't waste time when there's just so much good you can do here and so much you can learn and grow from. And yes, amazing.
I like that though. Don't waste time. Like there is time for grieving, but don't waste that unnecessary time on it, for sure. We're allowed to feel sad, just like also continue on and live a full life.
And because of Jesus, we're able to grieve and be happy at the same time. We're allowed to grieve. Yes, the and, exactly. It's not or all the time. You can't be sad or happy. You can have both because of Christ, and just really embrace that and be happy that you have that opportunity, because so many people don't understand that, and we just are so blessed.
It's a hard concept to grasp, even knowing it.
Yes,
like it's not comfortable to be in that place.
Yes,
all the
it doesn't
time,
always come naturally, but you can. I'm sure many of us can remember those moments where we felt that bittersweet feeling, where you're happy that you're able to have these good moments with family. It's like, I feel like the best place to like put it in perspective for most people is like at a funeral with people you love, like where you're like, you really miss this person and it's heartbreaking, but you also have hope for the next life. And even if you don't, there's also the sense of community with other people you love, and just being able to look back on the life of someone you love and learn from it. And so it is possible. Just remember that always. It is possible to feel both, and it's okay. God expects you to feel both. God feels both regularly, I'm sure. So all right, I think that wraps up the 13th tale, so we'll move on to what I was given by Cariana, the map of time. So my basic summary is even shorter than hers, because mine's also really convoluted. A group of Victorian men from various social backgrounds find their paths cross in a twisted web of time and romance. And that's all you're gonna get from me, because it is very convoluted. But let's review Cariana's thoughts and why she gave this to me, and then we'll get into my thoughts.
So, do you love the fact that you chose a book for me because it was like Victorian-esque writing, and I chose a book for you about a bunch of Victorian characters? We both chose modern books because they're Victorian.
We said right in the intro that we had a soft spot for Victorian literature, and this is still so
real, guys.
This is still true.
It's so real. I'm gonna just defend myself right off the bat. If you
just to spoil it,
if you understand our giggling at all, anybody who has any kind of sarcastic sense of humor has already figured it out. I chose this book for Tori 90% because I was pretty sure she hadn't read it. Because here's the thing, Tori's read everything. There was one other book that I asked you about that you hadn't read, but then I had like asked you about it, and it was like, you know, like I don't know, spoil. You like knew about it and whatever, and I was like, like I'd kind of rather something that's a little less known to her if I can find it, you know? So I scoured Tori's Goodreads. I asked her about a bunch of different books. There's only that one that you said, no, I haven't read that. Almost everything I have read, Tori has read. So yeah, that was the main thing, was I was like, okay, I think this is one that she probably hasn't read before. And then the other 10% was I read it in high school, so honestly, I remembered like so little of the story. I don't like it could have been 10 years ago for all I know that I read this book. But I remember just like absolutely loving it. I remember just thinking it was beautiful and exciting and dramatic and everything I would want from a Victorian novel when I discovered Victorian literature, which Tori's thoughts on it will kind of reveal, like, yeah, it was before I realized that I loved Victorian literature, this was the book that
it kind of
that I was drawn
you in a
to.
sort of way, yeah. Right? Just, I mean, like, as far as, like, the experience atmosphere kind of thing, or not really?
I never connected it to that. Okay. I don't, so I'm sure that, like, it was in me, but I never, like, realized that until you brought it up.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay. Fair enough.
Which tells me it probably was 10 years ago, because I discovered my love for Victorian literature my senior year of high school. Yeah. So it had to have been before that. Yeah. So it's been a hot minute. So that's why I remembered so little of the actual story, only certain major plot points.
Yes. So,
and there's always the couple small ones that stick out to you for no reason.
Yes. Yeah. Those random details that you're like, why do I think about this years ago? Yes. You just do.
Actually,
you just do. It just
there are moments in this book that sometimes I just think about.
Those scenes that live rent free in your head for no reason. Yes. Fair enough. So yeah, my thoughts Very different from Kariana's about the 13th Tale. I hated this book so much. And yeah, I felt really bad about it, but I know you got a great amount of joy from knowing that I just hadn't read it or even heard of it before.
Yes,
so
she hadn't even heard of it. I did it.
It was a big win on that front.
I did have to reassure her that I really didn't care if she liked this book or not.
She did.
There's like a 90% chance that if I read it now, I wouldn't either.
Like,
so
even before I read it, you had told me that, and I was like, okay, good, because I really did not like it. Some things, I guess I had meant to give a little bit of a content warning for the 13th Tale on here. There is some incest and some mild sexual content, right? It's not like huge.
There's nothing hugely graphic, but it's definitely
in there.
Like I wouldn't let my little 10-year-old sister read
it's
it, you know, like
it's an
adult
work.
book.
Yeah.
Even if the scenes aren't that graphic, it's very, very adult themes.
Yes.
Like extremely adult themes.
Like, I think there's definitely some themes of, like someone young who's not cognitively developed enough wouldn't understand even. Like,
it's true.
Probably wouldn't appreciate that. And, yeah, just content. So a little bit of a content warning on there.
For sure.
I don't know how the language was in it. Did you notice anything particular?
I don't remember there being any really poor language.
Okay,
I'm not super sensitive to that, I'll admit. So there could have
I'm
been
not
some
either,
and I wouldn't remember
unless
it.
it's a lot of it.
Right. But yeah, not that I can really think of.
So little content warning there. Map of Time needs a major content warning. It actually could have been worse, I will say that. But there were a few scenes that were a little more explicit than I think were in the 13th Tale. So there's that. So that wasn't like my favorite thing to start off with. Also, all of the women in this are treated as sexual objects.
I didn't remember either of these things. I
don't know if Kariana would have been as bothered by that as me. It tends
true.
to be something I get more bothered by than she does, which is totally fine.
I am not sensitive to the treatment of women in stories, so definitely, so I did not remember or recognize either of those things to warn Tori about.
I have, it depends on how women are addressed. All of the women in this are there to be sexual objects for the men, and that's where I don't like it, because I think it diminishes their value as daughters of God, which is part of what I'm going to talk about. Anyway, but yes, so that was a concern. I'm not specifically going to talk about that in that context, but that theme I'm going to address. So there is that. And then just the plot was kind of all over the place in a way that was almost interesting, but also felt like I was reading two different books. It felt like I was reading one book, and then all of a sudden the third part, there's 3 parts, and the third part, it suddenly became a completely different book. The first 2 were just kind of exploring the idea of time in a much more theoretical way. And then the last part, all of a sudden it was real, this time travel stuff, and I was like, what is happening? And it just felt strange. I could see the interesting aspect of it, but I just felt like it made the pacing and the way the story was being told just feel very jarring, and it was hard. It lost me, basically. It made it so I wasn't as focused and enveloped in the story as I would have liked to. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on it. I will say I think the writing was beautiful. That was the best part of this book, was I was just amazed by the writing style. It pulled me right in from the beginning, which I always struggle with the beginning of novels. It's hard for me to get in. I know a lot of people love the beginning of a new story or whatever. I hate it. I like the end. That sounds so sad, but I just like to see how everything wraps up and comes together. So when a book pulls me in right away, that means the writing's really good specifically. And so I really liked that. And even when I started listening to the audiobook probably halfway through, because I needed to hurry the heck up reading it. I was being a little slow. So I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to the audiobook while at work doing more mindless tasks and stuff, and so I was able to get through it fast enough, but even while listening to it, it even sounded nice. So there was very much a Dickensian bent to the writing style, which I really liked a lot. So that was one positive I can give this book, for sure. hated all of the characters, hated all of the sexual content and the way the women were treated, and the plot was just a little messy. So, unfortunately, yes, it didn't go as well for me. But I did still think of some gospel principles, like I kind of already mentioned. Always is. Yes, there's always something you can find.
Everything testifies of God.
Because everybody has the light of Christ in them. Are there some books that maybe have less of it than others and probably are not worth as much time?
There's one out there that we could say, no,
yes,
actually this one should go in the trash.
And a lot of them, some of them though, it's honestly just like the opposite of what the light of Christ is, which is what you learn from. So as long as you're going in with that right mindset. So anyway, my thoughts, my gospel principles were agency and our identity, our divine identity. And I know we've kind of discussed both of these topics before, but I thought it was interesting in this. There's a lot about time travel in this book and how time is affected by our choices and things like that. And for some reason, first of all, it does address the idea of parallel universes, where if you make a certain choice at one point in history, it can diverge off. If you like go back in time and change something, does it really change your past, or does it just create a new universe or whatever? So it's exploring that, and I always have hated that idea of parallel universes. And I think part of it is just like it's connected in some way with identity of like, okay, but then what's the point of like caring about these characters if there's just like millions and trillions of the same person out there that's maybe just slightly different or maybe pretty much the same. It's just like barely. So it like with things like Marvel, the multiverse stuff, like I sometimes get a little like, ugh, but like I have these characters I'm connected to and I just feel like it cheapens that sort of relationship, I guess, and those sorts of connections and stuff with those characters. And so I've never really loved it. And so when it was explored in this, I was like, I wanted to think a little deeper about why it bothers me beyond just like, I don't know, being in an individualist society and everybody wants to be unique and stuff. And I know that's part of it, but I also think I realized that the idea of parallel universes completely disregards the need for agency in the plan of salvation. And agency is so central to the plan of salvation. I think sometimes we forget how central it is. We kind of treat it as like a side thing where it's like, actually, this is like everything. This is just below. It's like even the atonement of Jesus Christ was possible because of agency. Like all of it is possible from agency and our ability to choose and make our own decisions. And having parallel universes just means like, oh, it doesn't matter because somewhere else you made a different choice and that's just what happened. Like it means that your choices don't really matter that much because you already have these other versions of you where you made the opposite choice. And so it's like, it almost feels a little bit determinist of like, you are in this universe, so you make this choice. And so I feel like it just devalues the idea of the choices we make matter because we didn't make the other choice. We have our free will and we're making a choice that impacts who we becoming more like God. And if there's just another version of us that just slightly diverges and goes in a bad direction, then like, what's the value of us and what's the value of the purpose of life? And so it's kind of a very deep tangent that I went on. I understand the interest of an idea like a parallel universe where you're like, what if I had made a different choice? What would have been different? But the point is, we don't know. At least not here. Eventually, we'll probably have a much better understanding of how our choices impacted our direction. But for now, we don't know, and that's part of the learning process. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, especially this past Sunday, actually. We talked about Adam and Eve in the class I attended, and they talked a lot about agency and everything about the plan. I mentioned the atonement, even the fall came down to a choice of, do you want to keep going in God's plan? Do you want to, like, God's always giving us the choice to keep going in his plan. And I just think there's value when we choose to do that, and that shouldn't be diminished. In connection with that, just time travel in general, I was thinking a lot about how the idea of going back in time and forward in time diminishes the purposes of God and our divine identity, because our whole purpose here is to grow and progress to become more like him so we can go back to him and be with our families. And so when you think about going back in time or forward in time, you're messing up what the naturally created progression that you're supposed to go through. Like, time really is just about progress or standing still. Like, it's all about what we're choosing to do to become more like God or not to. I don't know, does anything I just said make any sense to you? Like, I feel like I'm just waffling.
No, that's really interesting points. I'm not gonna try to argue like the merits or lack thereof of parallel universe.
Yes, please, like
it's really interesting. Like I definitely see your points, and I think that there are counter arguments to be made, but I think it's an interesting way of looking at it, and like why you might feel like some discomfort with them for sure, because it is like a weird thing to imagine. Yeah. It's interesting to me what you're saying with like the forward and backward in time. What you made me think of was that it's almost like they're trying to negate the need for an atonement. It's like by going forward and backward in time, like you're not allowing the natural progression of overcoming the choices, because there is a way to overcome and to almost reverse the choices that we've made, and it's because Christ has overcome them, and through his power we can do our best. Obviously choices still carry consequences, but we can do our best to overcome those and eliminate them, at least in God's eyes. And so this idea of like going back in time, I've never thought about it like that for sure, but it's almost like, no, I can fix that on my own, And I guess it's also kind of standing out to me that we mentioned that these are modern books that we're reading, and both of us chose Victorian-esque stories in one way or another in our modern books. But it's interesting to me that both of our points come down to this author lacks an understanding of what comes after this, whereas both of us are typically drawn to books written by authors who have more of that understanding, who occasionally lack a fullness of that understanding, but who are also very like Christ-centered people and recognize what's coming and his atonement and his love for us. So that's not a lot of specifics on what you just said, but
no, that's great.
But that's kind
like
of
I said,
what's
I was
standing
like
out
going
to me.
way, and it kind of feels like deep doctrine, even though it's not, because time travel and parallel universes are not real.
This is deep nerd doctrine. This is what my conversations
doctrine.
with my brother sound like on a regular
I
basis.
Love it. Perfect. But it is interesting. Like, I feel like people who want to time travel, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it would be so cool to like see certain periods.
I just want to
witness
things.
I just want to witness things.
Please.
Same thing.
Oh my gosh.
So
please.
like I definitely believe in that. I understand why people might want to move forward in time in their own life or backwards, but I think it's because they feel stuck in this life. Like they feel like time is constraining, where really time is actually so freeing if you think about it. Like God lives outside of time, and he put us in a place where there's time so that we can progress properly. Like it was part of the progression process is being here where there's time. And so people wanting to go back and fix their mistakes or whatever, they're not actually learning from them.
Right.
Like they're diminishing the ability they have to become a better person, not just fix issues, but actually change as a person. And that's what time does for us. That's what the fact that we can't go back and that we can't go forward means, is that we get to progress now, and we get to just see what happens, and we can redirect what happens just depending on where our values lie and what we want out of life and out of the next life. And so I think it is interesting to think about time as actually something so freeing. And that's something the world just doesn't understand. Like, time is actually such a blessing. And the fact that we're in the present moment always but we can look back on the past and we can hope for the future, is like a superpower. Like, we can just get this great opportunity while we're here to have the best setting for us to do exactly what we came here to do, what God sent us here to do.
Going back to that idea of things that are worth it not being easy that I kind of mentioned there at the end of mine with like families, right? I think another big reason for time travel, like the dream of time travel, is to make life easier, right? Like, why do you want to go back and fix your mistakes except to make your present moment easier? And why do you want to look forward at your future except to like be able to like calm down and not have to, you know, or whatever, you know, it's to ease your burden in one way or another. And it's just kind of ironic, I guess, like, in part because of what you're talking about, you know, like, we have this amazing ability to change and to grow, and we're trying to take that away from ourselves or speed up the process instead of just kind of enjoying it and experiencing it. And then there's also the fact that we can know how it ends, you know, like, why, we know what's happened in the past already, so why dwell in it? And in the future, like, we sometimes forget who's gonna win, you know? And if we choose the winning side, then we're also gonna win. And maybe that's not super specific. We feel so much discomfort and discontent and wanting to know what's coming next. And you and I both relate to that super strongly.
So
like, I am so not exempt from that feeling. But the fact is, like, God asks us to trust in him for a reason. And he's got really good credit too. Like, he's a trustworthy guy. If we continue to make the choices that have been laid out for us and that he helps us make, then it's fine. Then we know how it's going to end. We know what's going to happen. You know, we've been promised certain things and they're going to come true.
I did want to bring in, just kind of as an extra scriptural backup to some of the things we're talking about.
No, I make up my own doctrine,
right, I know.
actually.
That's what we do here, both of us. It's great. So in a talk given actually by Robert D. Hales as well, we just both ended up being drawn to him, apparently. I think it was in October.
The author of the book swap.
Yes, there you go. The author of the books, the true author.
The true
Robert
author.
D. Hales.
A much better author. I'm sure.
Yes, I'm sure. It's from October 2010, and it's called Agency Essential to the Plan of Life, which just right there, just the title, Essential to the Plan of Life.
So
right
good.
There you go.
I love that. My title was The Eternal Family.
Right?
We just learned something about Robert D. Hales.
I know. He just
to the point.
knew those doctrines and taught them, and it's great. And this was like, what, 15 years later after yours? So anyway, so he says, contrary to the world's secular teaching, the scriptures teach us that we do have agency, and our righteous exercise of agency always makes a difference in the opportunities we have and our ability to act upon them and progress eternally. I also love the idea of progressing eternally. Like, we're just always going to have the chance to progress and just become better and better and better. And we may reach a level of perfection, but I feel like there's probably some detail work in perfection too. So I just really love that. I feel like this week I've just learned to be much more grateful for agency and the chance it gives us to continue to choose, and the chance it gives other people to choose. Like, we are here, and I think sometimes in the church, just because we want everybody to do the very best they can and we want the very best for everybody, we sometimes forget that there are 3 kingdoms of glory, that God has his plan set in motion to where everybody, for the most part, will be as happy as they're ready to be. And what we're doing here in the church is just meant to help people be prepared for the highest level of happiness, if that's what they want. And so even if people don't want it, there's just so much goodness God has in store for us, and our agency is there to allow us to become exactly who we want to be and get exactly where we want to go. And so I love too in 2 Nephi chapter 2, which we just recently read for Come Follow Me, specifically in verse 13, it's where it says, "And if ye shall say there is no law, ye shall also say there is no sin. If ye shall say there is no sin, ye shall also say there is no righteousness. And if there is no righteousness, there be no happiness. And if there be no righteousness nor happiness, there be no punishment nor misery. And if these things are not, there is no God. And if there is no God, we are not, neither the earth, for there could have been no creation of things, neither to act nor to be acted upon. Wherefore all things must have vanished away. And now, my sons, I speak unto you these things for your profit and learning, for there is a God, and he hath created all things, both the heavens and the earth, and all things that in them are, both things to act and things to be acted upon. So again, right there, telling us that everything's been created so that we can act for ourselves and utilize our agency. And it's to bring about his eternal purposes in the end of man after he had created our first parents, as it says in verse 15. Yeah, any other thoughts you want to share? I feel like I've just blabbered on enough, so.
Nothing comes to mind.
No? Okay.
This was kind of fun, just doing like a little...
It's like a little book club, like kind of more informal than we usually do.
Yeah.
Not that it's ever that formal, but still a little less so. A little less constructed, I guess, in our discussion. So that was fun. Anyway, I guess to sum up, both had gospel principles to learn. The 13th tale, I think we would recommend, as long as you're okay with those little content warnings we gave. Map of Time, take your chance if you want. I wouldn't recommend it, and Cariana doesn't know if she would.
I have no reason to recommend it. I trust.
So yeah. Anyway, but there you go. I don't know if we'll do this next year. I wouldn't mind it, but I know it was kind of stressful for Cariana finding something for me. So we'll see
99% of the time, Tori comes up with the gospel principles. I'm capable of doing it. I just have to
No, not the gospel
it.
principles. I mean the books themselves. Picking a book for me to get. Yes.
No, that was the worst thing ever.
So yeah, like I said, I don't know if we'll do this again.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought about having to do it again.
Like, it was such a pain to do it once.
That I know. I would just watch your Goodreads to see if you read this other book that I have in mind.
Good plan. So we might do it.
So
I
we'll
thought
see.
it was fun
We'll
if
see.
we can get over that hoop, but
It's a good time. Or if I can just get over not super surprising.
Yes.
Tori really does read a lot more than me, so.
And there's honestly a lot of things I haven't read, so even if I've heard of it doesn't necessarily mean I've read it.
Right.
So,
Fair enough.
There's always that. So anyway, let us know down below if you have any thoughts on anything we've discussed. Also subscribe, of course, if you are interested. If this was your first episode with us, I'm sorry, it was a very strange one, but hopefully, it was really good, but it was different from what we usually do. So you may go to the other episodes and be like, oh, what's this? I don't know. But you can check us out continually and subscribe and see more. So definitely do that. Also follow us on Instagram if you are interested at God in All Things. We do a lot of updates there, spiritual updates. Cariana updates on her Come Follow Me studies. So that's really great. And we just, it's a great time.
It's gotten better.
It has. We're actually doing it regularly. I should say Cariana is actually doing it regularly. I still haven't done anything, but there's that. And then you can also check out what I'm reading just casually on the channel Good Strong Words on YouTube. I have a lot of fun over there, so definitely check that out. And I think that's everything. So thank you so much for watching, listening. Keep remembering to see God in all things, and we will see you next time. Bye!
Bye!